our viewing audience to the third of 3 candidate forums that have been sponsored by Ashland's AAUW and the Mountain Meadows Democrats. Prior events held in this space include the candidates for City Council. Anyone who happened to miss those can find the recorded event posted on the AAUW and Mountain Meadows Facebook sites, and possibly on the websites as well. So make sure you catch up with those. I can assure you, having seen them both, that we had some very lively conversations, and I think that will give you an excellent view of the candidates that you have for office. Today's forum, again, the third of 3, will feature our 2 candidates for Ashland Mayor, Julie Akins and Tonya Graham. I want to begin with a couple of things. First, to Sarah Spansale, who is the technical genius behind this Zoom. Thank you so much, Sarah. We're grateful for your help. I want to also issue thanks to AAUW and to the Mountain Meadows Democrats, specifically to Regina Ayers and to David Lane, who have represented those organizations for us. David, in fact, is going to be one of the little Hollywood squares on our screen today. He will serve as your timekeeper. And he'll hold up, when we reach the 10-second period, he'll hold up a little sign indicating that you are at 10 seconds. And then he will tell you when the 10 seconds have elapsed and it is time to stop. However, recognizing that it can be difficult when you get going and you're passionate and you're talking about the subjects, to miss seeing David. So if you do and you keep going, I'll gently interrupt and let you know that you've reached the end of your time and ask you to finish your comments. The questions that we are going to hear today were composed by members of the AAUW and the Mountain Meadows Democrats. It is our hope that they will give viewers a broad understanding of our candidates, the issues that are important to them, and the values that they will bring to decision making. The format for today is this. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to make opening comments. They can say anything they want, tell us about their qualifications, what they think they bring to office, anything that they think is vital for voters to be able to consider. We will then go through a series of questions. The answers will be limited for each candidate to 2 minutes for those questions. Opening comments, I think I said, is 3 minutes. Answers to the questions will be allowed to use 2 minutes. And then we will have at the end of our debate 2 minutes for final comments from the candidates. And again, those final comments can be used to respond to something that happened today, to summarize something that hadn't been yet touched on, or to provide voters with any last thoughts about what they should consider when they go to the polls, but in the case of Oregon, when they open that mailed-in ballot. And so with that, we have David ready to go. I think we have the candidates ready to go. It looks like we have a hearty audience out there. We're so glad that people found us on this Saturday afternoon, and we will begin this forum for candidates for Ashland Mayor. We are going to begin opening comments on alphabetical order based on last name, and Julie Akins, that means that you're up first and you have 3 minutes to tell us about yourself.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here on a Saturday afternoon. Certainly want to let you know, I understand how much has changed. Just minutes before walking in my door to do this, I had a conversation with someone who lost everything in their home and talent. And I think all of you in the audience can relate. You've had a similar experience. Times are unimaginably different than we might have suspected even 10 years ago. And that brings me to the mayor's race. It's not about right or wrong. It's about right now. Where are we now, and who's the best person to lead the city based on where we are? I have a lifelong love of history and American politics and this country, and have some heartbreak about where it's been going. And I have a great love of Ashland. For the last 20 years, I've been madly in love with this town. I grew up covering cities and communities as a reporter and a journalist, and as an adult, I grew up doing that. And then as a child, I worked on campaigns with my parents. It's in my blood. My mom was a social worker and my dad was a firefighter. And we understood about giving back. And it was a great opportunity to grow up with them, and a great opportunity to sit here before you today. To be honest, I was not planning to run for mayor. In fact, I wasn't really planning to run for council 2 years ago. I had a lot of folks who wanted me to do it. And I did it more to bring voice to issues that I hadn't heard talked about, issues such as affordable housing and living wage jobs and diversifying Ashland's economy. I felt like a single rail economy based on tourism that was primarily based on OSF was just a dangerous thing to be involved in. I felt that we needed to diversify. And so I ran on that basis, not really expecting to win. And then when I did, I fought hard for those issues consistently and also around budgetary spending. I feel like if you don't take care of your budget and you don't spend correctly, when the time comes, the money isn't there. It's very much like your own life. If you don't put money aside for a rainy day, when the rain comes, you're not ready. And so I was concerned about that as well and remain so. I still wasn't really planning to run for mayor until the coronavirus struck. And then that very first week of shutdowns, the city of Ashland decided to put the city hall bond on the ballot. And I felt like that was a missed opportunity, a wrong sense of priorities. I felt the same way about the jail bond. My fellow counselors decided to send that forward, and I didn't think that was the right priority. I didn't think that residents here wanted to be disproportionately burdened with that potential income tax increase to build a mega jail. I didn't think that's how people here felt, and that turned out to be true. So those two issues began galvanizing my idea around running for mayor, and now I feel really right about it. I feel right about it because I tend to be a person who thinks maybe slightly differently than the administrations that we've had in the past. I'm very much a social progressive and a fiscal conservative, and I think that's what the times call for, and that's why I am asking to be your mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. It was just 2 years ago when we were all running for council in a lively audience at the UU on 5th Street, and I wish we could be together in person, but Zoom seems to be the way of the time. So much has changed and we need to change with it.
Thank you, Julie. Our second candidate for Ashland Mayor, Tonya Graham.
Thank you. And I would just like to start by thanking AAUW and the Mountain Meadows Democrats. We were, of course, here in person a couple of years ago, and it's even more important this year when it's so much more difficult to talk to voters in person that we have a way to communicate and to talk about the issues of the day. So much has changed even since 2018, and we were in a time of great change at that point. There have been some conversations in the community about whether this race is about the status quo or about change. And in my mind, we are already undergoing transformational change. There isn't a potential to hold on to everything the way that it was before. But these next 4 years are going to be critical for us in terms of making the decisions that will take care of our people and put Ashland on a path to a future that remains vibrant. None of us, even just 3 or 4 weeks ago, could have imagined what would happen with the Alameda fire. And one of the things that has been particularly poignant to me is that when we declared that emergency as a council, we did it by adding a line to our existing emergency declaration. And that's where we're at. We're in a situation where we have emergencies and disruptions rolling in on top of each other. And that's a big part of why I'm running for mayor. I've lived here, Ashland has been my home for 24 years. I've raised my children here, and my youngest son is a junior in high school this year. It is an amazing community, and it's a community that cares about not only each other, but about the land and about the climate and about how we come together as community to solve problems. In my day job, I am the executive director of the GEOS Institute, and I work with a team of people who help communities look at the impacts of climate change locally, decide what it is that they care about and what's important for them to keep, and then set about to take action to move themselves in a direction of a much more climate resilient future. And resilience is really what this is about. It's about Ashland making sure that we have economic, social, and climate resilience. And when I say resilience, I don't mean bouncing back to some state we were in the past. It's more like what we talk about in the climate resilience world of bouncing forward, or maybe you've heard building back better. All of those ideas are about moving from where we are, understanding what the changes are that are coming about for us, and then taking actions that align with our values. That's what I do during my day job, and I can help Ashland move through all of the work that we have to do in the next bit of time to make sure that we are on that path to resilience. And that's why I'm running for mayor.
Thank you to both of you for your opening comments. In a moment here, we'll plunge into the list of questions we have. Again, just another word about those questions. They were compiled by members of AAUW and Mountain Meadows with the intent of showing a breadth of issues and the candidates' position and values. Unfortunately, we will not be able to take questions from members of the audience, but we hope as you listen, you will see some of the concerns that you carry personally reflected in these questions. And so with that, the first question will direct first to Tonya, and it is this. Let's start with the catastrophic fire that struck our region and has plunged us into a response over the last month. As mayor, how would you see Ashland working with neighboring cities to address recovery and response? And again, questions, you'll have 2 minutes to respond.
So the Alameda fire has brought home to us the risk of living in a forested mountain community in the Western US in a way that I don't think anything else could have. We know that people are suffering. We have thousands of people who are still suffering, some of whom are in the Ashland, more rural part of the Ashland community. What we know is that in the right conditions, hot, windy, and dry, almost anything can burn. And that fire was so incredibly fast because of those weather conditions. Climate change is bringing more of that to us. For the last, before I joined the council, I served on the Wildfire Safety Commission. And since being on the council, I've continued to be the liaison from that commission. And the city of Ashland has done a lot of really good work over the last 10 to 15 years, not only thinning and creating prescribed fire in our watershed, but also helping community members harden their homes, make it so that when those embers land on their homes or on their properties, they are less likely to catch fire. And that work is critically important. It's critically important as a community that we keep going and that we amplify those efforts. And in fact, the Wildfire Safety Commission is coming forward to the council with a list of recommendations from a meeting that they've just had around how we can move forward quickly given this heightened awareness that's happening. At the same time, what the fire has shown us is that fire doesn't respect jurisdictional boundaries. And so how well one community has responded to the risk of fire will often determine to what extent fire might reach its neighbor. And so what we have to be thinking about here is how do we take a regional approach? How do we continue to do the work we need to do in Ashland while making sure that we have strong partnerships with our fellow communities all the way through the valley. And that every community is in a different place in terms of how much work they have done. And so my hope is that Ashland can help lead that effort because we have so much of that work already underway.
Julie Akins, how can Ashland work with our neighboring communities to address response?
Well, I think that there are lots of ways we can work with our neighboring communities. I also think we need to work with our own community as well. The fact is it shouldn't have been a surprise to us that this could happen. Paradise Fire happened, similar community, one way in, one way out, nestled in the hills with a lot of trees around as we have here, and in the urban interface, the wildland urban interface. So we had some warning, and in fact, we had some folks who wanted to come and help us with that in terms of evacuation plans. And I think that we didn't do a good job. Frankly, I think that we needed to have a better evacuation plan, and we're working really hard now to get it together, but it's a bit like closing the barn door after the horse is out. So we've got to get on that. We've got to be quicker about it. Certainly having traffic from I-5 go through town and clog up town was a really scary and terrifying experience for people, and they're not over it. So we have to do better with that. Nixle's good, but it's not enough. I think on a county level, not activating the emergency broadcast system and some other methodologies was a fail. So I think we start by not failing in those ways, having a better evacuation plan, having it really clear, not relying solely on one piece of technology to notify people. Although I know firefighters work their butts off going door to door and evacuating people. Unfortunately, it could have been a lot worse. So I'm glad that they were there to do that. We need to support our firefighters in the weeks and months going forward and years to beef up forces there to make sure we're ready. And of course, regional communication has to be a big part of this. And we have to be talking to our sheriff department and our emergency responders and figuring out how we can do a better job of evacuating people and notifying people of where they're supposed to go. That kind of mass confusion was terrifying for people. I've got several plans I've put forward, and I think we're all working together to do better. And that would be job one to me.
Thank you. So I think both of you referred back to 2 years ago when we had a council forum over at the RUU church. So now you've both been on the council for 2 years. And my question to you is, what have you learned as a counselor that you would use in your new role as mayor? And Julie, we'll start with you.
Well, I think the first thing I would learn is that we need to do a better job of listening to our constituents. I've been there in council meetings with a packed chamber, people who have come to tell us what they want and what they don't want and have asked us to listen. And I don't think that we've done a great job of that, to be candid. I think about the stop and identify measure, ordinance 3176 as it was called, where the police can stop somebody and ask for their name and date of birth. People of color in our community and transgender folks and others came forward and felt that this was something they didn't want to have. We already have a situation where people of color are stopped twice as often as white folks. So that's just an example. They came forward and said, please don't do this, and the council did it anyway. Folks were pretty clear that they didn't want this bond measure to go to the ballot. They weren't interested in having a new city hall bond at a time of COVID, and we did it anyway. So what I've learned is don't do it anyway. Listen to what your constituents want and provide a real listening ear and some feedback. I don't think folks have felt involved enough. Right after this COVID struck and we saw our food and beverage tax revenues and our transient occupancy tax cratering, just going down drastically, I asked to convene the Citizen Budget Committee and get that input, and we decided not to do that. And I think we should have done that. So what I've learned is more responsiveness to our constituents, for one, and secondly, moving a little faster. I know we've got a big ship, but it's not gigantic, and we have to be able to move things quicker around affordable housing, especially right now. And so as your mayor, I would move things more quickly. I would step aside and allow for more creative solutions, and I would definitely listen more.
Thank you. Tonya, what have you learned in your 2 years on the city council that you think will be useful to you?
I think one of the most important things that I've learned is that for someone who is trying to make change in local government, the wheels move excruciatingly slow. It's amazing how simple something can seem like it is until you try to move it through a local government structure. And it's not a criticism necessarily of local government. On some level, we don't want government swinging wildly one direction or the other. But what I've learned is that there are processes and there are systems of government. And if we are moving towards solutions, we have to be able to navigate those systems. And so I've spent a lot of time really digging into how does our budget work? How do we allocate funding? What are the things we actually have control over versus the things that are mandated, either by a funding source or by something else? And it's really in understanding that process that we can translate the goals and the desires of the people into local government programs and policies and procedures. And some of that, honestly, it gets really boring sometimes when you're sort of digging through that process, but that's how change is made in local government. It's made by understanding that system and moving through it. I've also learned that there is something that says, to that old saying that when a good wind blows your way, be ready to sail. Because in local government, there are moments in time where suddenly you can take more action on something that's important. And we saw that just twice in the last couple of years. The first with the climate, the youth climate activism that was happening. And we were actually just about to be discussing that a climate emergency when COVID happened. But that's one of them. And then the other one was, unfortunately, the murder of George Floyd. And that is what really spurred our social equity and racial justice resolution.
Thank you. Tonya, another question for you. If elected mayor, what will be your first 3 priorities?
So the first one is really at that sort of macro scale. The city needs to maintain essential services, and that means parks, fire, police, and planning essentially is what is in our general fund. We also handle our electric utility and our water utility and Ashland FiberNet. So we need to make sure that we are adequately funding those things that are required of us. Those are the things that aren't done by somebody else. They're really the responsibility of the city. Alongside that, we know that we need to reduce our fire risk. We know that we need to address issues like climate change, the needs of our unhoused neighbors, affordability in Ashland, and also social equity and racial justice issues. And so all of those issues need to be done in partnership with others in the community, both residents and local organizations. And so that combination of work needs to be right at the center of this. To do that, we need to make sure that we are aligning our budget with those goals. So the budget process that's coming up in the spring is going to be critically important, and we need to make sure that we are prioritizing what is the most important to the community. And that means the third piece that I'm coming to is engagement with the community. So right now, we need to decide what is the most important work for this community, and we need to decide it with the community. And so I've been in conversation with the folks at SOU about how we might survey the entire community early next year to get more direct feedback from them about what's important. And at the same time, we've been asking staff, and they've been preparing for us a listing of what are those things that the city has to do versus the things that are optional. So getting that clear understanding of that from the community and then rolling that through the budget process and into next year is really a critical part of meeting the needs of the city and all of its people.
Thank you, Tonya. Julie, if elected, what would be your first 3 priorities?
Well, I think priorities change as reality changes. And I think evacuation planning and fire readiness has to be the #1 priority at this juncture. Also, as a result of the coronavirus, our economy is in tatters, and part of the reason for that is an over-reliance on tourism. I've been talking about this for a long time, and it's time to really step into economic diversity, diversifying our city's portfolio. And we can do that a variety of ways. We have living wage employers now who we need to ease the way so that they can hire more people and expand their businesses. Lots of ways to do that work within the process and the system. I think that we all understand that everything that happens has to be lawful and within a process, but it doesn't preclude getting things done. I think about the Croman Mills project and what could be done there and how it's been sitting on ice for a really long time because the goals around it are unrealistic. We need to change that and make it a more streamlined process. And of course, housing affordability. That was a problem before we had these fires. We were at 2% and 1% vacancy rates, and now it's even worse because we have thousands of people who lost their homes. So when we talk about affordability, it needs to be indexed to what people actually earn. So if the median income is $45,000, we need rentals that are around $1,200 a month. We need people to be able to buy things at $150,000, $200,000, of which there's virtually nothing in Ashland. So there are ways that we can do that. So many different public-private partnerships that are available to us. There are ways to offer land and build on that land. There's ways to work with the Jackson Housing Authority and many other prospects, but we have to actually prioritize housing for people. And I think we failed to do that. We can do that now.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge when there are only 2 candidates, you both have to talk a lot. So we appreciate your quick thinking and quick response. There is no time to rest, hardly. And so this question goes to you, Julie. We're going to move now to the city's budget. And the question is, what's your assessment of the city's overall financial status, and what do you see as the big challenges ahead? And Julie, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, you're right. No time to rest, especially as it comes to the budget. We were pacing at about 6 million behind where we hoped to be prior to the fires. Estimates are between 8 and 10 million. We don't know yet as COVID grinds on, but it's going to be difficult. So our priorities have to be getting these things in line and figuring out how to do it. We talk a lot about essential services versus value services, and I think those things have to be somewhat flexible as things move along. Clearly, we can't afford to cut fire, not at this juncture. And so we've got to look at every element in our budget and figure out how to prioritize that. I did decide to sign a pledge about priority-based budgeting, which I tend to just call budgeting. I think all of us, when we go through our lives and in our businesses, we budget based on what's the most important thing first. So we have to get a handle on that. There are some ways that we can save some money, though, and the Citizen Budget Committee came to us with lots of ideas. Many of those suggestions were taken, many were not. I didn't vote in favor of this budget because I felt like it was too thin of a line. 39,000 roughly in reserves of a $308 million budget is just a little bit too frightening. We've been in negotiations with city employees. I think we need to drill down on that in terms of benefits and retirement. Look, I'm not out to punish anybody. I want everybody to make a good living and have their health care covered in their retirement. It doesn't do us any good for people to live in fear. At the same time, folks may need to step up and pay a little bit more in terms of their healthcare costs and their retirement costs. Additionally, we may need to do some furloughs, maybe once a month, rolling through departments to help us save money. Other cities have been doing this a long time. The university has, and we may need to look at those options as well. But certainly we need to tighten this budget. We need to be realistic about our goals as a result of the hits we've taken.
Thank you. Tonya, on to you. What's your assessment of the city's overall financial status, and what do you see as the big challenges ahead?
So there are a couple of things. The first is that we've been having budget difficulties for several cycles now. And a big part of that is that our assessed value for property taxes can really only go up 3% a year. But we have line items in that budget that are jumping much more quickly than that. Healthcare is one of those issues. I haven't seen a year when premiums didn't go up at least 10% in the last 6 years. So whenever we have those expenses that are jumping faster than our ability to keep up with them, we're going to have a tightening of the budget. At the same time, since the recession, we have had to pay extra payments into the state retirement system in order to backfill because of how they had originally set it up for folks who are pretty much already retired. Those extra expenditures are going to carry on, and we've spent over $10 million since 2014 in those additional assessments from PERS. And the staff is gathering the data for me from before 2014 because we were paying for it then as well. So when you start to have those things come in on your primary budget, it causes problems, and we've seen that. We've seen the council and staff and the budget committee sort of scrambling to try to hold our programs together in the face of these kinds of challenges. Alongside of that, we have COVID, and COVID is affecting our food and beverage tax and our transient occupancy tax, or what we also call the lodging tax. So that's really where our shortfall is coming in, and our initial estimates were that it would be about $6 million. Hopefully, we're about to find out how those the first several months of this year have gone. It appears that maybe that shortfall is going to be a little bit less than that, but we'll see. But we need to balance within those budgets, within those funds. Some of those are restricted to what they have to be used on, and some of them are for the general fund. So it's all about prioritizing and figuring out how do we deal with this reality of having less money, particularly in our general fund.
Thank you, Tonya. Now we're going to take just a little bit of a step back from the budget and look at the larger economic issues. We certainly know that COVID, smoke, and wildfire have clobbered our local businesses, and they have challenged our economic health. What do we need to do to bolster the vitality of our community and the larger region? And Tonya, we'll start with you.
Well, one of the things for us to keep in mind is just that the effort to diversify the economy has been underway for a while. And there's two different kinds of diversification. One is within our visitor base. So we're seeing people coming for other reasons besides tourism, and that's not by accident. That's because efforts have been underway for several years now to broaden out that visitor economy. And then alongside of it, we need to continue to diversify across Ashland's economy. And we have other mechanisms. I know several of us have gone and spoken with Blue Marble. It's a great company locally, looking to expand. So those exist. Our manufacturing companies exist. We also know that we have other engines. SOU is a major engine in this community. It's not just the visitor economy. The hospital is a major engine. The school district is also, and so is the city. So alongside those entities, how do we make sure that they all stay strong along with our theater, and then broaden out from there? We are very, very fortunate to have a university in our community because we can connect with them and create programs. Ashland Works has some great new programming happening where they're connecting student interns with local businesses and local nonprofits. Those are the kinds of innovative ideas we have to put forward, because one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we have extremely high land costs. And so when somebody is looking to create a new business, it's going to be more expensive to be in Ashland. And so how do we counter that? How do we make sure that we are incentivizing the right kind of businesses that we want to come? Clean energy businesses, people that will provide family wage jobs. How do we do that given our reality? And it really comes down to figuring out what is that innovation that we can offer here locally. And as a city, we do it by partnering with the chamber, by partnering with groups like Ashland Works, and by partnering with our local business owners.
Thank you. Julie, what do you think we need to do to bolster the economic vitality of our community and the larger region?
Definitely, I agree that we need to encourage family wage jobs, living wage employers here who are already here, and allow them opportunities to expand. Tonya brought up Blue Marble, two brothers who grew up here and hope to expand, and we need to help them. They wanted to move to the B Street yard, which is going to be for sale as the city moves its storage over to the Hardesty property, and they weren't able to get an appointment and a tour, and we just have to not do that. We have to be helpful. I mentioned Croman Mills earlier. We have to find ways so that it's reasonable for people to develop and build there, and it hasn't been for a variety of reasons. So we can maybe pull some of the stops out and bring that back to a more reasonable level. SOU, I taught at SOU, and had my students in the community as interns and working in paid positions throughout the community. It's certainly a good idea. It's not really new or innovative. It's something that a lot of instructors have been doing for years now, but I applaud everybody who's trying to do more with that. SOU itself is in trouble. Ever since the regents expected universities to hold their own, it's difficult in the state of Oregon when you have U of O up there just with all that Nike money doing really well. So we have a lot to compete with. I think that we can do that. SOU's done some innovative things. They started transgender studies, and it's my understanding they are the first university in the country, or at least among the first, to do that. And we need to encourage that interesting course of study, and in helping them to continue to bring folks here to town and diversify the folks who live here as well as the economy. But mostly I think we need to just not create stumbling blocks for employers and for building here. Affordable housing is a big deal. People don't want to come here and expand here if they are here, if people can't afford a place to live. So that's a big job for us, and we need to tackle it.
Thank you. I'm going to shift to a discussion of the role of mayor. We are soon, because of the vote of the public, going to have a city manager instead of a city administrator. How do you think this will change the role of mayor? And Julie, Julie, we'll have you start us off with this.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I was in support of this. I think it's a good idea, and I'll tell you why. And I've had many conversations with other mayors about this and their feelings, and it's a mixed bag. Some think it's great and some don't. what I like about it is that I think it democratizes things. You have a professional manager that accounts directly to the city council as a whole. And I think it allows the city council as a group to monitor the management of the city. And I think that's an improvement over having just sort of one person who runs things. I don't think that's been a good system in the city of Ashland. And it's not to cast aspersions, it's just what's happened. We've had one mayor for a long time now, and I think it's created a very clear and defined way that the city operates. And I don't think that the city of Ashland or any city needs to operate under the vision of one single person. I certainly, as mayor, would not expect it to operate under my solitary vision. I think democratizing it and having the council as a whole monitor activities is good. I think having a professional city manager, and I hope that we find someone with Oregon experience and understands Oregon law and land use, because it can be rather dicey. I think having a professional city manager manage staff and not micromanage staff will be good. I think it opens the possibility to engage with more different types of people as opposed to sort of the inside group. Ashland tends to be cliquey, and that's difficult for people to get in the loop and be part of the voice here. And so I favor it for all those reasons.
Thank you. Tonya Graham, how do you think having a city manager will change the role of mayor in the future?
So I don't think it will change it all that much, because in my mind, the important elements of a mayor's job are to be a convener and a facilitator and a communicator in the community. Prior, in the way that we had been organized, the mayor was also able to sort of go in and clean house, if you will. If the community didn't like what was happening in the city, they could send a mayor in to fix that. That's not what we have anymore, and that's okay. Because like I said, the most important things is that the mayor can bring people together around a shared challenge to create solutions. A mayor can facilitate the council through its work plan and making sure that it's getting through its planning processes and all of the various things that direct how government happens. The mayor also has a critically important role in communicating and making sure that the community has ways of engaging with city government. So in that connecting with local people element of it is really where the mayor's power sits. I don't think it's really about authority around specific job descriptions so much as it is the mayor is the one person elected leader who can speak on behalf of the city, who can work in partnership with neighboring communities and make sure that we're taking on issues like reducing our fire risk at a regional scale. It's really the mayor that's going to be reaching out and stepping into those processes and bringing people together around them. And so to me, I think that the most important things that a mayor does are still in this new way that we operate. And I would also just like to say that we have been being administered by professional people. There's a notion out there that we suddenly are going to have professionals at the helm, and we've always had that. What we have now coming in January is a different structure in terms of authority, but we have great people working for us, and we have had for a long time.
Thank you. And Tonya, we'll start off with you for the next question as well. I think both of you have talked about affordable housing, and we do talk about it a lot in Ashland, but I think we also agree that there is very little that is actually affordable on the ground. If you are elected mayor, what will be your strategy for increasing the housing options available here for people earning low to middle incomes? Tonya.
So we've already done a number of things on this, the accessory dwelling unit, the cottage housing ordinances, a variety of those sorts of things to improve and to increase the availability of housing. Again, one of the problems we have is that land prices are so expensive. And so affordable housing is only going to be created if we set that as a strong goal. And right now, we don't have metrics. We don't actually know how we're doing year to year against any particular target. So we know that we need a variety of different housing types, not only the subsidized very low income, but also that middle range of housing that is for, teachers and folks who are working in grocery stores and those sorts of things, who are making middle incomes and need somewhere to live in our community. And so it's very important. I think the Croman Mill property is an important piece of this, and council earlier this year directed them to include more potential residential housing there, along with some of the economic industrial development. But part of this is the city getting clear on its goals and then figuring out where can it work with developers, with people who own land, to move these ideas forward. Are there places where we should be bringing annexing land into Ashland? I don't know the answer exactly to that, but those are the conversations we need to have, especially given the fact that the already tight real estate market that we had before the Alameda fire has gotten so much tighter. We didn't have housing capacity before that, and now we're even more strained. We also need to be looking at SOU and what they're doing to house their students, because that's an incredibly important part of this as well.
Thank you. Julie Akins, if elected mayor, what will be your strategy for increasing the housing options for people earning low to middle incomes?
This has become a more crucial question as time has gone by. This was a big deal years ago when I was driving the West Coast and documenting homelessness. I was surprised to see how many working families and people on Social Security had fallen into homelessness due to a variety of factors: a lack of a living wage that could put a roof over their head, and the rising costs of that said roof. It's been a big issue, and now it's really huge because we have these wildfires that have devastated our neighboring communities, and we're going to continue to expect mass migration through climate change for a variety of ways: fires, floods, rising tide. So we've got to get a hold of this now. One way that we can do this is we can provide some incentives. I talk about this all the time: public-private partnerships, and the Jackson County Housing Authority is a good example of this, and HUD used to do this a lot too, which is this concept of having land that the city owns that they can make available to develop on, so that the cost is brought down, because land is a huge cost. And it's interesting what Councillor Graham is talking about, expanding potentially into the urban growth boundary to create more possibilities. And that's something I'm interested in too. I think we can also provide incentives. Excuse me, I'm looking on my notes here. I think we could also provide some incentives for people in terms of that. Our SDCs, that's the price that it costs to connect into our system. They're among the highest in the region. The city of Medford lowered theirs for this exact reason, so that it could be possible for people to build housing at less expense. There's a project that's been sitting for 7 years that's multifamily housing that would be truly affordable, $800 a month for some of those apartments. We need to fast track some of those kinds of proposals and get them in. They've been sitting there, and it's been in keeping with the planning, and we need to get that going. We just take too long on these things. I understand process, but process shouldn't be 7 years when we need housing.
Thank you. We know that we live in a community that places a high value on citizen involvement. How would you ensure that citizens feel heard and are deeply engaged in the community? And Julie, we'll start with you.
Sorry, I just muted. I would be certain, not so that they feel heard, but they actually are heard. I think people know the difference when you speak to your city council and you request that a certain action be done or not done. If they typically vote a different way and don't accommodate, and you see this happening more than once, you see this happening all the time, you know that you're not being heard. So I think what we need to do is actually hear them. Additionally, I would like to see us do more town hall meetings. I could see us doing these monthly and have them be open so that you could discuss things not necessarily agendized. I think that would be good. I'd love to see our citizen budget committee engage in a way where they come and actually give a presentation on a quarterly basis, so that those folks involved in the citizen budget committee can tell us where we're at and have that continued engagement around the budget and finance. We tend to do this, every other year, and then it's hurry up and get it done, and then we don't check in frequently enough. So I would like to do that. And I think generally, yeah, I think actually listening to what people say. I think our format is quite wooden. There's some reasons for that it has to be, things have to be noticed. We have sunshine laws. I support all those things. But I do think more regular town hall meetings, allowing people to speak to what's on their mind and heart, would be important. I think better communications. One of the things that I've heard a lot about after COVID struck and during the fires as well, is people just didn't feel that the city was reaching back to them to tell them what was going on. And I think that we need to do a better job of that. I'm an avid communicator. I believe in being on the record and transparency. And I do that a lot, even to the annoyance of some of my fellows on council. But I think it's really, really important that people know what's coming up and that you take in their input and you apply that input to your decision making. And I think as mayor, I would be doing a lot more of that. I know I would. Thank
you. Tonya, as mayor, what would you do to make sure that citizens are heard and engaged?
Well, this is one of my, has been one of my primary objectives since coming on council. I've been concerned about the fact that we don't have communication and engagement staff, someone at the city who is primarily focused on making sure that the community understands the decisions that are coming in front of council and how they can participate in those processes and in getting their ideas put forward. It's when we look at the overall question of resilience, one of the pieces that is critically important is just that people really understand what is happening with their local government and then how they can engage. And we, unfortunately, I think have gotten in a little bit of a rut where we primarily just do study sessions and business meetings. And anyone who has sat at one of those two little microphones knows that it's an uncomfortable space to be. And a lot of people just simply won't do it. And so having alternative ways of community gatherings, once we can do that again in real life, but in the meantime, doing it by Zoom, where people are can come and speak to their counselors in a much more relaxed and informal way is important. One of the things I did right when we were coming on to council, just before the budget process, is I worked with our city administrator to develop the listening session that we did that, alongside the survey. And those sorts of processes I think are really important. So not only can we get the people who will come out and spend some time at a forum type piece, but we can also make sure that we get to the folks who are much more comfortable, sending in their information by computer. It was an incredible experience actually sitting at the table, listening. We had 4 people come up at a time and just tell us what was on their mind. And it was great because not only did we get to hear what was on their mind, but their neighbors got to hear it too. And there is something powerful about that type of communication. And we need to integrate that much more into our process at the city.
Thank you. I'm going to shift now to a question about the management of city properties. The failed bond measure in the May primary cast questions on the future for City Hall, the Community Center, and Pioneer Hall. In addition, the city has purchased the Briscoe School property from the school district. As mayor, how will you recommend that we manage repairs and determine the future use of these properties? Tonya, you can kick us off.
That's a big question. We've been in a process of looking at the different properties that we have to determine what the best use is for them. So I'll start just with the Community Center and Pioneer Hall. Those are smaller projects. There is some potential in future budgets that we might be able to accommodate them in some fashion. What we're doing right now is we've directed staff to refine the numbers so that we have much more specific numbers in terms of what that would cost. And then coming into this budget cycle, I know staff is working to figure out, is there any way within our existing budget that we can address one or both of those issues? And so that's my hope, is that we can figure out a way within our budget cycles to get those buildings operational. They're critically important to our community to have those gathering spaces, especially as we emerge from COVID. The City Hall, I think we need another conversation in the community. Unfortunately, COVID rolled in right as we were having that conversation. But I think part of the problem with just that bond initiative was that the engagement with the community up before it wasn't what it needed to be. And so we need to step back and have those community conversations, get a clear idea of what people want to do in terms of that building, and then move forward in whatever is the best way from that. And then your last question was about Briscoe School. And Briscoe School right now is a school. And I know that there are some conversations underway about potentially that school purchasing the Briscoe building. We need to address it one way or the other. I think we don't want to be in the business of being landlords for any long period of time. And we've pretty much decided that that's not where our new city hall is going to be. So it's time to get it moved along to whatever its future use is going to be. But certainly we would be looking to keep the parkland that's behind it, because that was a big part of why we built it in the first place. But I'm particularly excited about the fact that that school serves migrant children, and that there's the potential for it to serve pre-kindergarten children in Ashland. And so we know that's a huge need, and if it can remain a school, I would love to see that happen.
Thank you. Julie, same question. As mayor, how would you recommend that we manage repairs and determine the future use of these properties?
Thanks for the question. So we put money aside to work on the community center and the log cabin, and it was determined it wasn't enough. I'd like to recheck that. The numbers just seem really, really high to me when you're talking about $1 million. Those are pretty humble buildings, and I feel like we don't need to moonshot everything. So I'd like to go back and crunch those numbers again and find a way in our existing budget to get them back open, because they are the heartbeat of our community, and our community members need places to be, to have salsa dancing, to meet as community members, so, and to feed the hungry, which we've been doing at the log cabin for a long time, and we need that back again. So yeah, I think there's a way to do that without asking for a bunch more money. The city hall, I don't think it was a situation where people didn't understand or where we needed to educate folks better. I think people rejected it, and they rejected it soundly. The money was too much. It was too big of too much of a moonshot. There are ways that we can fix up City Hall to make it safe without it being all that in a bag of chips. It's just way too much money. So if we're going to revisit that, we have to revisit it realistically. As to Briscoe School, I agree. It's already a charming little school. It's been a school. I'm not really sure why we purchased it. It needs a new roof, and it has a lot of expenses. So it's a little bit of a white elephant, but I do agree that it would be nice if it could remain a school. I think about organizations like UNITE, who does a great job for seasonal workers. I think about Northwest Seasonal Workers, and I wonder if we can come together in some sort of a public-private way so that we can keep that open as a school and make the repairs necessary. But it's true, we don't want to be landlords, and I think the city does own a ton of property that we either need to do the right thing with or let go of.
Thank you. We know that we have certainly been engaged in national introspection around racism and our history of racism that were spurred by the killing of George Floyd, and national protests and protests within our own state and community. And certainly in Ashland, we've talked about these issues as well. How can the city council and mayor make Ashland a more inviting, comfortable community for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Julie, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that when it comes to equity issues, it has to be measurable progress. I think that a good intention is just that, a good intention. After the George Floyd murders, and people got even more serious, although not serious enough to solve this problem yet. But as we got more serious, I formed something called the Truth and Reconciliation Council, and it was changed to Conciliation at the suggestion of Dan Wapipa, one of our native leaders, saying you can't reconcile what's never been conciled. So that began as a process of bringing people of color together to decide what they wanted us to do as a community. And that process of taking input remains, and suggestions are abounding as a result. I tend to like the social equity index methodology, which is to really look at the key components of what it means to live in this community and make sure that we're actually doing so equitably. I'd like to see something with teeth in it, as in a commission that looks at policing and takes any sort of issues with policing seriously and investigates that and makes recommendations not only to the police department but also to the council as a whole, so that we can monitor how we're doing in terms of policing. Equity also involves jobs and housing, and so I think as a rising tide lifts all boats, I think that's true for people of color as well. We need to be looking at affordable housing with a lens toward BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. And we also need to be looking at employers and see how we're doing, the city among them. How is the city doing on its equity index? When it has openings, how does it proceed in terms of making sure that that is a key component in how we move forward? So I think it runs through the fabric of our lives, and I think we need to look at our social equity in terms of policing, hiring, housing, and Black and Indigenous people of color in terms of representation and business ownership. All these things are crucial in really actually having an equitable community. And mostly we need to take input from the people involved. I think deciding for folks is infantilizing and is part of the colonizing culture that got us where we are. We need to stop doing that.
Thank you. Tonya Graham, same question. How can we make Ashland a more inviting, comfortable community for BIPOC residents or visitors?
So this is an issue that is particularly personal for me. My children are Haitian, and I've been raising them here for the last 15 years, and Ashland has provided a lot of wonderful things for my children, and great relationships, and a lot of really good, a lot of good has come from them being here. What I can also say is that we're not there yet. My children still have had situations with local businesses, with other people. There have been, there's just a variety of things that go all the way from sort of overt, obvious racism to issues that I think are much more around bias and people doing things that they're not aware that they're doing. But this is an important piece because this is so foundational to who Ashland is as a community and who Ashland wants to be. We see ourselves as welcoming. So how do we make sure that the way we see ourselves is how we actually are? And I think that's the question in front of us. At the city, we can do a number of things inside the city government, but then we also need to be looking at how might we partner with other entities around the community. One of the things that I did in the wake of the George Floyd murder was to meet with a number of BIPOC community leaders and ask them two questions. What do they need right now to feel supported in this moment? And what does the city need to be doing in the longer term? And I took the answers from those conversations and I drafted, along with Councilor Slattery, the social equity and racial justice resolution that the council has passed. And in it, it has the list of tasks, and we're going down those tasks. We essentially set this up that the council is a committee of the whole, so it's coming back in front of council on a monthly basis to make sure that we're making progress, that it's not just talk. And it's also opening the door because this is just the first resolution. We want those ideas coming from the community. This resolution just looks pretty much at what the city can do within its own systems, but we want more of that engagement. And as those ideas come up from other folks, it's important that we are able to integrate them into the work that we're doing.
Thank you. You all, I must say, have been very easy to manage here today, but we know that sometimes city councilors are more challenging. So as mayor, how would you intend to go about bringing council discussions to closure to enable the council to vote on issues in a timely manner? And Tonya, we'll have you kick us off with that.
Sure. You know, I think a big part of the mayor's job is to understand what is important to different councilors. What is their perspective? What are the things that they're going to be concerned about or that they're particularly passionate about moving forward? And then to do the work of developing commissions and all that sort of thing so that we can move that body forward. Those relationships, I think, are critically important between the mayor and the various councilors to make sure that that the council itself functions smoothly. So when I think about issues coming in front of the council, the first thing that I want to do is to make sure that we can have conversations that are, that people can bring things up, that we create some space at the end of the agenda for just things that people would like to discuss. And we won't take any action on those. But what are some of the things that people are hearing from the community? What are some of the things that we should be getting on the agenda? Right now, it's so structured that it's difficult sometimes to get new topics and new ideas in. And I think it's important that we have some less structured space. And maybe that's in a business meeting, maybe that's in working sessions that we periodically have, but we need to improve our ability to get ideas that are coming from counselors in front of the council. And I think that that's where a big part of this is going to come into. But it's really about relationships. It's about me as mayor knowing what matters to the different counselors, and to try to facilitate their goals going forward. If they're particularly concerned about the budget, then we need to know what is it that they want to see there. If their issue is primarily social equity, then we need to know that, and how do we move that forward. All counselors are generalists on some level, but we all also bring specific perspectives and expertise, and we need to figure out the best way to bring that and use that as a city.
Thank you. Julie, as mayor, how would you bring council discussions to closure in a timely manner?
Thanks for the question. I think that our council meetings are difficult to watch and participate in because they're not facilitated terribly well. We need to be able to move things along and get a vote and then keep moving. And we also do need councilors and residents to be able to bring matters to council and get them on an agenda. It took me a year to get a study session on affordable housing and homelessness issues. It shouldn't take that long. So it sort of applies to what I spoke to earlier, and I'm just going to acknowledge the elephant in the room here. There's some clickiness that goes on, and it's hard if you're not in the inner circle to get things out there. That shouldn't be right. That's not right. It needs to be a fair process, and I look forward to the new form of governance and a city manager process so that we can objectively have everyone's views come before council and be discussed and create ordinances that matter to residents and to councilors as well. So I think we have to facilitate it in a more streamlined way. I think kicking the can down the road and taking months and months to make decisions that can be made more quickly and efficiently needs to happen. And I think that everybody's voice needs to be included and equally important. And frankly, that hasn't been true. So I look forward as a facilitator to making sure that everybody is heard and that things get on the agenda that need to be on the agenda based on the priorities of residents and councilors. And that's what I intend to do in a fair and objective way.
Thank you. You all have been doing a wonderful job addressing the issues, but we've also been talking for more than an hour now. So we are going to conclude with one final question, and then we'll give you both an opportunity to make final comments. So the last question is going to be the vision question, and we'll start with you, Julie. What is your vision for the city of Ashland? Where do you see us in 5 or 10 years? And given that, how will you bring councilors, staff, and residents together around that fair shared vision for the community?
Well, things are changing so rapidly. So in 5 years, if you want to come back to me and say this vision didn't quite pan out the way I'd hoped, I understand. We have this incredible challenges with climate change and with national politics that I think is fair to say has us all a little flapped. But what I see is the Ashland of the past. This was a very vibrant community with folks feeling really included. And I also see the Ashland of the future that is economically diverse, that has living wage jobs, that has affordable housing, that's realistic and indexed to what people make. I don't see any reason why we can't do that if we set it as a priority. I think one of the things that happens when you consider yourself a tourist town is that you become a place that rolls out the red carpet for folks who visit, and you forget that that red carpet needs to be out for people who live here year round. And so what I see is Ashland as a great place to live, and hey, you're welcome to visit as well. And some of the ways we do that is highlighting what we already have here, which is an incredible, beautiful, natural place. We can highlight the fact that we have these great vineyards, fantastic wine around here. Napa built a whole community just on wine. And that's just one of our many assets that we can be highlighting. Great trails, great biking. We're always in Bike Magazine as one of the best places to be. We can continue to bring folks here for that, and the people who live here can enjoy that. And we need to be a equitable community and a safe community for everybody to come here and to live here. And we do that through all of the plans that we have around affordable housing and living wage jobs and diversifying our economy. And for heaven's sakes, let's bring some fun back. I think Ashland's become a little bit too quiet, a little too much of a monoculture. We need to be a culture that invites music and art. And I have all kinds of ideas about how to do that. And I'd love to talk more, but I'm out of time. So mostly what I see is a vibrant, diverse culture. We can do it.
Thank you. And Tonya, where do you see the community in 5 or 10 years, and how will you bring staff members and counselors and residents together toward that vision?
The vision piece is always one of my favorite pieces, because we get to imagine the world the way that we want it. And I think in Ashland, we have a lot of shared values around diversity, around climate, around affordability, and taking care of folks who are unhoused, and getting ahead of that curve. When I look out, I see that we've done our work on climate change. The International Panel on Climate Change has given us 10 years to 2030 to really get a handle on our emissions. And so I see Ashland as being much more electrified. I see smaller and much more sort of person-oriented transportation. I see lots of people walking and biking, and vibrant community businesses that serve our community, as well as the people who come to visit, and that are aligned in that way. I see people enjoying the outdoors. I see a diverse group of people. So when I say diverse, I mean racially diverse in terms of age, and also diverse in terms of income. And the thing about that vision is that it doesn't happen accidentally. It's not going to happen unless we make specific decisions that put us on the track towards that. It's not something that we will sort of accidentally stumble into. And that's why it's so critically important that we come together around a shared vision. One of the things that we are going to be doing in the next several years is walking this balance between moving quickly and taking the right moves. And that's all about bringing the community together to figure out what is that shared vision, and what are the very concrete steps that not only the city, but our community partners and our residents need to take in order for us to get to that vision out in 5 or 10 years.
Thank you. So that concludes the lineup of questions that we had for each of you today. But now we're going to give you one last opportunity to share anything that you would like with the voters. And we will begin with Tonya. You have 2 minutes to to share any last thoughts with people who are watching and who will see this when it's recorded. What do you think they need to know?
Yeah, I don't know anyone who wasn't under several different types of stress before the Alameda fire came on. It has been a difficult year in so many ways for so many people. And one of the things that I think is the most important thing for us to do is to make sure that we're staying together as a community, that we understand that this is something out of the bounds of everyone's experience, that we are all doing the best we can and navigating a very difficult situation. And the city's role inside of that is to make sure that people are safe, that we have the fire resources that we need, that people know what's expected of them if in an emergency, so they feel safer around that situation, so that we are both dealing with what people need in the near term, as well as moving ourselves forward in the longer term to increased resilience. What does it take for us to be safer in terms of fire? We have a lot of those pieces together. We just need to make them stronger. What does it take for us to be have a more vibrant, stronger, more resilient economy? We have some of the pieces of that. What are the other pieces we need? How do we move there? All of that is a deeply community-driven process. Those questions that we have in front of us, we have to be working together, but we also have to be doing it from a place of goodwill and care for each other. And to know that, you know, right now we may not all be at our best, and that's okay, because we're a community together and we can still get through all of this if we have a unity of purpose and we work hard. And that's why I'm running for mayor, and that's what I'll do if elected.
Thank you. Julie Akins, last comments.
Well, I think it comes down to this. If you feel satisfied with how things have been going, then, you know, keep on that track. My opponent's been endorsed by the current mayor and council. And if you feel good about where things are, then go that direction. If instead you feel concerned, as I do, about the direction things have been going, and you agree that it's time to re-envision things, then I'm your person. For me, it's not about, as I say, it's not right or wrong. It's just right for right now. And that's what we need to be focusing on. We need a community that comes together and does not have what we had with the Alameda fire and panic around evacuation plans. We have some plans that weren't communicated well. We need to be better communicators in our city with you, our residents. That's my strong suit, and I would be doing that. I don't agree that we need to hire somebody else to do that. We're in a budget crisis. We can't hire our way out of every problem. I feel that that would be my job as your mayor, and I would do that. So I ask you to consider the things that are your priorities, where you want to spend, and what you want your community to look at and look like. I say this all the time: affordability, livability, and sustainability. Those are the primary goals, and I put things in buckets according to that. We need affordable housing, and we need a budget that is affordable for our taxpayers and residents. We need livability. That means a safe community that takes care of each other and plans for a rainy day. And we need sustainability in terms of all of the incredible things that we can be doing to regenerate our community, our soil, and our planet. And together we can do these things without crippling ourselves financially. So if you're down for a change, I am too. And I'd like your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the forum for today. But first, before we sign off, I want to issue a number of things. First, to the candidates, we just had more than an hour where you barely ever got to stop thinking. You've clearly delved into the issues. You are thoughtful and articulate. And I think it's really just a tribute to both of you that you've agreed to step up and run for mayor. This is the third forum sponsored by AAUW and Mountain Meadows Democrats. Special thanks to both of those organizations for stepping forward and putting this together. Particular thanks to Regina Ayers and David Lane, and to Sarah Spansale, who's behind the scenes. Note that forum number 1 featured the candidates for positions 1 and 5. Forum number 2 featured those 4 candidates who are running for position 3. And then today, of course, is our mayor candidates. All of those forums are available in recorded form on the AAUW and Mountain Meadows Facebook pages, possibly on their websites as well. If you know friends, relatives, neighbors who haven't had a chance to view these directly, please direct them to the recorded material, because I think it offers a really strong, insightful understanding of who the candidates are, how they relate to the issues, and what the values are that they will bring to a decision-making process if they were elected. And with that, many thanks to Julie Akins and Tonya Graham, our candidates for mayor. We appreciate your being here. We appreciate all of the efforts that went into today, and that you are investing in communicating with our community during this election process. And we will sign off now. Thank you.